So we're starting a brand new sermon series today. It's called Core Culture, and really, what this sermon series is about is what is Rise Church about. And so we've come up with 6 things that we think, if we're living for Jesus, if Jesus is living through us individually and through this church, these are the 6 things that really would boil down our culture. So those 6 things are authentic relationships, radical generosity, a culture of invitation, profound life change, loving like Jesus, and selfless servitude. So we're going to go through those in September and the first week of October, and we're just going to look into that. And we just want to sit down and say, what is Rise Church all about? And these things, we want these things to be communicated in a way that's not just us talking about it or us writing about it or whatever. This is the thing. If someone were to come to Rise Church or talk about Rise Church in the community, they'd be like, oh, that's what this church is about. This is how we live. This is how we live as the community. So we're starting out with authentic relationships. And when you think of relationships, a lot of times you think of friends, right? And I remember, friends can be weird. Growing up, I remember one time I was in 2nd grade on the playground, and a teacher comes up to me and says, hey, so-and-so said that you said a 4-letter word out on the playground. And I was like, well, I don't. Honestly, in 2nd grade, I was so sheltered, guys. I did not know what this word was. I had no idea what it was, why I would say it or anything like that. And so I was like, I didn't say that. And it was like, well, so-and-so said you said that. And I found out later, this person was supposed to be my friend, said they were my friend, and they were going out just making up things that I was saying, these bad words. It was a Christian school, too, so, the punishment was a lot worse, at that time. But, they did believe me that I didn't say it, so I got off on that, but I really didn't say it. One time I had another friend say to me, I always wanted a Game Boy, and he had one on the bus. Back in the day, just a black and white Game Boy. And he was like, I'll sell you one for $1. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I went home and told my parents, I was like, there's someone on the bus, and they said they'd sell me a Game Boy for $1. And my parents were like, no, they're just messing with you. There's no way. I was like, no, seriously, they said they would sell it to me for $1. And so I got $1 and brought it to him. He's like, oh, I'm not going to sell it to you for $1. And I mean, as a first grader, kindergartner, or whatever it was, man, that just crushed me. But those people said they were my friends, but they weren't really acting like it. When I think about authentic relationships, I think a lot about college, because I went to Bible college, and the best way to tell you if you've never been to Bible college is the way I can tell you is it's a good academic education. It's really something that it's a accredited degree and all that, but it really feels like you're just living at church camp. It really feels like that. You've got small groups during the week, you've got devotionals during the week, you've got chapel, multiple times a week, and it really feels like that. But what that culture was able to do was, you really you form these authentic relationships with the guys who you lived at in the dorm, and that really taught me a lot about community and a lot about relationships. We're going to look at a story. It comprises 5 or 6 chapters in 1 Samuel, so we're not going to read all that. But I just want to talk about a relationship in the Bible that really just was authentic. It really was, just a friendship that was so good and so blessed by God that we can just learn a lot from it. And that is the friendship of David and Jonathan. So we're going to start the story back. David, he's a kind of a scrawny shepherd, and he's got a bunch of older brothers, and they're picking. God told Samuel, "You're going to anoint the next king of Israel, because Saul's not doing a good job." And so he goes to David's family, and there's all these older brothers who are just, they look like kings, they act like kings, and Samuel's like, okay, one of these guys is going to be it. And one after another guy says, no, that's not him, no, that's not him, no, that's not him. He's like, well, who's left? And his dad's like, well, David's out in the field. I'm like, okay. And God said, David is going to be the next king of Israel. And So after that, David, he's anointed. He's just preparing to become the king, and and he meets Jonathan, who's Saul's son. Now, if you know anything about monarchies, usually the oldest son of the king is going to be the next king. But that's not how God wanted it to work. So David was going to be the next king. So really there should have been a lot of jealousy. There should have been a lot of animosity between Jonathan and David. But as they're living together, as they're close together, they really just become, just really good friends. And David, if you know the story, he kills a giant named Goliath. And the people of Israel start singing songs about him. They're just ready for David to really take over because Saul's just kind of not doing good things at this time. And so Jonathan and David are really good friends, and Saul actually tries to kill David a couple of times, and Jonathan tries to reason with him, and Saul's like, okay, I won't try to kill David anymore. And then he does it. He tries to do it again, and it's really bad. David has to go on the run for a little bit. But when David writes later, Jonathan eventually dies, and when David's writing about the relationship later, he just says great things about the relationship. And really, like, if you're looking at it, if you're looking at the relationship, it's really Jonathan that was the reason that this relationship, that this friendship could be so good. Because, David, he didn't really have anything to lose by being friends with Jonathan. Jonathan, he could have tried to say, I'm really the rightful king here. God didn't really say that. God didn't really tell Samuel to anoint David. I'm the son of the king. I'm going to be the next king. So really, Jonathan was sold out for this relationships. And Jonathan had to sacrifice a lot for that friendship, for that relationship. He had to sacrifice a lot of power, a lot of place on this world, and things like that. So I want to read a passage in Romans 12 and read verse 16 there. And basically, when Paul's writing this, he's just closing out what he's saying to the church in Rome. And he tells them there to live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not be conceited. As we think about authentic relationships in the church, and we look at Jonathan and David, that was a friendship. But this sermon's not about friendships. It's about family. Because if you come to a church, if you're involved in a church, if you say, I love Jesus, and I want to be involved in a local congregation, you're part of a family. And I think David and Jonathan would say that they were family. You've got those really good friends in your life, and you say, we're not friends, we're family. And that's how you should look at the people who are in your church, who are in your congregation. A lot of times we might say, my real friends are outside this body. My real friends are somewhere else, or the people I grew up with. And that's okay to have those friends. That's a good thing, and to have those friends. But we should look at our church family and the authentic relationships we have in our church family like something that just is something like it's nothing like anything else. So I think of authentic relationships, and I think of Jonathan and David, and what really comes to mind first is sacrifice. Authentic relationships are sacrificial. What do you think of when you think of sacrifice? For a lot of us, maybe it's soldiers, the military, and the way they sacrificed to keep us safe, sacrifice for our freedom. Maybe it's first responders, the firefighters and paramedics and police officers who put their life on the line to keep us safe. Maybe that's what you think of when you think of sacrifice. Or maybe it's teachers and the way they sacrifice their life to raise up our generations in the schools, or nurses, or there's something. When you think of sacrifice, you probably think of someone who sacrifices for you. And when we think of relationships, a lot of times we forget about sacrifice. But I want to recall all the sacrifices Jonathan made for David. Jonathan, in worldly terms, in a worldly monarchy, Jonathan had the best claim to the throne of Israel because Jonathan was Saul's son. But because Israel was actually a theocracy and not a monarchy, God ruled Israel. God said, well, David's going to be the next king. So Jonathan, he had a claim to the throne, and people would have listened to that. He would have drawn a following if he said, I'm going to become the next king. But he gave that up. He gave up his safety because Saul was after David, and Jonathan, as David's best friend, would have been sacrificing his safety too. He sacrificed his security, his power, and eventually his life. And if I think about that, I think about sacrifice. And I think about that story. I think about soldiers or first responders, all great people who sacrifice. But the biggest sacrifice to me is the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross. The sacrifice that Jesus said, yeah, I'm going to give up my life so anyone who calls on my name and anyone who accepts that free gift will be saved. That's really what and this story is about. It's really what sacrifice is about. And when we look at any story in the Bible, and we look at good things or bad things, or things that happened in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, it can all point to Jesus and what Jesus did for us. But when we talk about authentic relationships, one of the amazing things authentic relationships in the church, is they are sacrificial. If we're living our normal, everyday, selfish lives because humans are selfish, we aren't inclined to be sacrificial for anyone else. Why? Because people hurt us. If I lay a lot on the line for someone and I sacrifice for them, the next day they're going to do something that lets me down and disappoints me. It's just how we work as humans. People are messy. And so do I really want to go out of my way and sacrifice for someone when they're just going to let me down? It's countercultural to say I'm going to sacrifice for someone. It's countercultural to say I'm going to look at this group of people, that's my church family, and I'm going to sacrifice for the person next to me because just for the sole reason that I love God and they love God. And one of the major things we can learn from Jesus when we say, who is Jesus? What was Jesus about? One of the main things we can learn from him is he sacrificed for us. And one of the major things we can do to model Jesus in our life is to sacrifice for others. And I always say, who better to start with to sacrifice for other than your blood family than your church family? Because the people next to you, they aren't friends or acquaintances or just someone who's here together with you on Sunday morning. They are your family. And one of the things that Jonathan and David did is they battled together. They went out and Saul was hunting David down. So they battled together. David and Jonathan battled together. Their authentic relationship was forged in the battles of survival. Authentic relationships built in your church family are forged in the battles of salvation. Let me say that again. David and Jonathan, their authentic relationship was forged in the battles of survival. The authentic relationships you build here at Rise in your church family are forged in the battles of salvation. We all mess up. We all sin. We all hurt each other. We all encourage and love each other the best we can. And we say as a family, we battle together for each other's salvation, and we battle together for the salvation of our city. That's a huge thing about authentic relationships. Built in the church family. You can have a friendship. You can have a good friendship that doesn't, there's no sacrifice going either way. I mean, not even to the point of I'm going to remember you at 8 o'clock and send you an encouraging text or something. Like even that little bit of sacrifice. And it's still, 6 months later, I haven't talked to someone and we still call each other friends. And that's okay. But authentic relationships built in our church family, it's not friendships, it's family. And that's because they're forged in the battles of salvation. Now, when I look at David and Jonathan, I see something else when I think of their authentic relationship. And what I see is loyalty. And loyalty can be weird too, just like friendship can be weird. Sometimes we're loyal, or we see someone who's loyal and we're thinking, why are they loyal to that person? What do they see in that person? Why are they loyal to whatever they're loyal to? A lot of people are just loyal to be loyal, it seems like. And I saw a story in history, and it was Clark Clifford. He was employed by Harry Truman. And Clark Clifford shares something about his former boss. Every morning at 8:30, the president would have a staff meeting. One day, the mail clerk brought in a lavender envelope with a regal wax seal and flowing purple ribbons. Upon opening it, President Truman found a letter from King Saud of Saudi Arabia, and it began, "Your magnificence, your magnificence." Truman subsequently sent a message to the United Nations supporting the admission of 100,000 Jews into Palestine, which King Saud wasn't a fan of. So soon afterwards, he received a second letter from King Saud, and this one began, "Dear Mr. President." So it went from your magnificence, to "Dear Mr. President," because he didn't feel like he had his loyalty anymore. You know, when I think of loyalty, I think of my dogs. There's nothing more loyal than a dog. My dog, Elsa, she would kill someone if she thought I was threatened, or if Jenna was threatened, or Ariella was threatened. And dogs are just blindly loyal to whoever they follow. But are you loyal in your relationships? See, in culture tells us to treat relationships as disposable. Culture tells us if a relationship isn't doing anything for us, that we just get rid of that relationship. We just push it aside. Culture says, okay, I'll be loyal if it helps me. I'll show loyalty if it gets me a little farther ahead. I'll show loyalty if it makes me feel good, or I'll show loyalty if I feel like it's going to help me. And culture tells us, go ahead and be loyal if it isn't hard. And let me tell you something, loyalty is hard. Let's go back to Jonathan and David. Jonathan was loyal to David in a way that it's mind-blowing. It just absolutely blows my mind how Jonathan was loyal to David. Jonathan was torn in two. Late in his life, Saul was an evil man. He was a bad man. But it was still Jonathan's father. And he wanted to be loyal to David too. And it put him in a hard place because his dad was trying to kill his best friend. And Saul, being the insecure king that he was, demanded absolute loyalty. See, what Jonathan and David teach us is that we should have a lifelong loyalty with our brothers and sisters in our church family. Jonathan and David were loyal to each other in a way that's not just casual friends or casual acquaintances. I'm not going to be loyal to you unless you show me something. But when I step into my church family and I look at the people in my church family, I'm going to extend loyalty in a way that I wouldn't just for some random person. Because we do things together. We fight together in the battles of salvation. Now, loyalty doesn't mean that if someone's being horrible to you, or someone's disowned you, or someone has left you, that you're the one doing something wrong. Sometimes people don't do well with this. They want to be loyal, but the other person won't allow them to. That's not a fault of you. That's a fault of the other person. But what David and Jonathan's life shows me is that when we love God and we love each other, there's a special kind of loyalty that the world and our culture, they're never going to understand. We work through problems. We work through hurts. We work through differences. We work through life-changing, altering, or threatening situations. When I have a relationship in the world and it gets hard, what am I? My first inclination is to walk away or to turn my back or to turn around. And that might be my first reaction with a relationship in my church family as well. But that needs to be different. See, the world, it tells us to teach relationships as disposable. The world says, oh, you got all you needed out of that person, move on and throw them away. But God says, live in authentic relationships. Stick it out with a loyalty that we can only have because we know Jesus. How many chances am I going to give this person? A lot. Because how many chances has Jesus given me? Too many to count. And when I think about loyalty in a relationship, loyalty in my church family, it comes back to Jesus. And I think of at Jesus' the end of his time here on earth, Jesus was arrested and Jesus was put to death by the government. And Jesus' best friend, his most loyal friend, Peter, what did he do? Peter denied him. Denied he ever knew the guy. He threw that relationship away and said, I'm not being loyal to that. That's going to, that Jesus' time here on earth is done. He's about to be killed. I'm looking out for myself. And Peter threw away that loyalty. But what did Jesus do? He welcomed them right back in. And that's what Jesus does to us every day. Every day we mess up. Every day we sin. Every day we make a mistake. And what's Jesus there to do? Welcome us back in when we ask for forgiveness. Everything in this core culture series is a massive thing, is something that we should be living out as individuals and we should be living out as a church. But I want to tell you, authentic relationships in your church family will change your life. If you take one thing home today, I want you to remember this. Build authentic relationships in your church family because real life isn't real without them. Build authentic relationships in your church family because real life isn't real without those relationships. And one of the main reasons I see this in the world tries to replicate what churches have, the fellowship churches have, the community churches have, the sacrifice churches have, but they can't. Nothing replicates this community. Nothing replicates the relationships we have with each other because we love Jesus. Nothing can replicate that. Nothing can replace that. There's something missing without that. And I want to say this with all sincerity today. Everything we do at Rise Church is about Jesus. If it furthers Jesus in our lives or in the lives of this community, we're going to do it. If Jesus commands it or models it, we're going to do it. If it's taught in the Bible, which is solely centered on Jesus and what he did for humanity, then we're going to do it. And that's what this core culture series is all about. You see, if you could boil down Rise Church's core culture to one word, one person, it simply would be Jesus. Look at Jesus' life. He lived in extremely authentic relationships. Jesus called men to follow him, and they gave up their jobs. They gave up any wealth they would have on earth. They gave any power they would have on earth to follow him around for 3 years and to spread the good news about who Jesus was and what he was about. Jesus modeled to us what an authentic relationship looks like. Look at the early church after Jesus descended back into heaven. Man, these people, you look at the book of Acts or just stories that are told about the early church right after Jesus went back into heaven. I mean, it's amazing that what these people did. In Acts it tells us that if someone had need, they would sell their land and give to the person in need. They were sold out for each other. They lived together. They worked together, and their their authentic relationships were forged in the battles of salvation. Man, they believed Jesus was coming back in 5 minutes. And they lived their life with that urgency. And the only way we can ever make a difference on the salvation of our community and the salvation of the lives around us is if we forge together and we live like that, with that urgency. We're missing it today. We're missing it today. And this culture, the culture tells us it's all about me. And even inside the church, that's seeped in. Even amongst Christians, that's seeped in. It's about me. Everything I do is about me. Where I go is about me. What I want to do is about me. What I want to say is about me. We're missing it. I want to tell you something. If you commit to living in authentic community, in authentic relationships in your church family, yeah, it'll be messy. Yeah, you might get hurt. Yeah, it's going to be challenging. But it will change your life. It will change your life. I promise you. I also promise you that if you don't have authentic relationships in your church family, you're really missing one of the things that life is all about. Real life isn't real without the authentic relationships found in your church family. This is something that David and Jonathan knew. They knew, hey, we love God, so we're going to live life together. And we're going to sacrifice for each other, and we're going to be loyal to each other. Paul knew it when he taught. One of the major things in Paul's letters throughout the New Testament is live in harmony with one another. In the Romans verse we just read, live in harmony with one another. And Jesus knew it. Jesus knew it in how he lived in a way in a community that's just so profound, the way that Jesus lived with those men in his life and sacrificed and had loyalty with each other. And if Jesus knew it and Jesus modeled it, then I'm going to try my best to do it. And I hope that as a church that we try our best to do it. Because there's nothing worth modeling yourself after. There's nothing worth digging in and saying, I'm going to follow this, or I'm going to follow this trend, or I'm going to follow this trend. Nothing is worth doing that. It's all a waste of time unless that person is Jesus. Unless that person is Jesus. And Jesus modeled these authentic relationships. If you're sitting here today and you're thinking, I want to be in authentic relationships in my church, how do I do that? Currently, we have small group sign up. Small groups are such a way, you can, we have a large gathering on Sunday morning, but you can really, dig down and just, forge relationships with a smaller group. Those sign-ups are currently happening now. They'll start mid-September. That's a way that we can just really dig in and create those relationships. I would encourage you to come to the events that we purposely plan here at the church. The upcoming Fall Fest, the yard sale, the birthday party next month. Those are ways that past this Sunday morning gathering, you can really forge relationships with each other. And the last thing is the most important. It's our own initiative. If I sit here and I say, no one is talking to me, or there's no opportunities for me, let's make those opportunities. Let's go up and talk to someone new. Let's say, hey, I'm going to host a couple people over at my house for a little bit. Our own initiative is so important with creating authentic relationships. Don't just wait around for the leadership or the pastors or someone else to create these authentic relationships. Let's do our own initiative. There's a way that God uniquely designed you to operate in this church family. He designed you in a way that you can plan something or start something that no one else can because of how he designed you. And my guess is you have an idea of what that is. And I would challenge you to go out and try to do that this week. You know, I would challenge you to build relationships in your church family. Because real life isn't real without those relationships. And if we're truly living for Jesus, if we're truly living like Jesus needs us to live in this community, then we're forging relationships with each other because of the battles of salvation. Jonathan and David, they forged relationship with each other because of battles of survival. Most of us aren't fighting for survival every day, but we're fighting for the survival of our salvation and those around us. People make mistakes. People sin. I make mistakes. I sin. People encourage me. People love me. I encourage people. I love people. And those relationships, those are the best thing that's ever happened to me, is those relationships forged in the battles of salvation. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we can worship not just as friends, but as family, together, gathered under one roof, with one mission, to reach people for Jesus. We can't do that by ourselves. We can't do that if we're divided. We can only do that together in authentic relationships in a way where we're sold out for you because of our love for you and no other reason. I pray as we go from this place that we just remember the importance of authentic relationships in our life, that we remember the importance of each other, the person next to me and the person behind me. I pray this in Jesus' name.